Hello, and welcome to this launch event of a positioning process on food systems, looking at it from the grassroots perspective. I'm Laurence Modrego. I'm from ECOLISE, from the advocate team, and we are so happy as a team to launch this positioning process today. Thank you so much for joining. And before I present you the agenda of today, we'd like to have a short icebreaker. So my colleague Katarina will now ask you a question, a simple question. Katarina, shall I stop presenting?
Yes, hello everyone. We'd like to ask you what comes to mind when you think about just and sustainable food systems? I sent you a link to join a Mentimeter, and if Enrique could share.
Could you share the link again, please?
Yes, of course. Yeah, interesting. Not exactly what one would expect. We have a diversity of people and ideas, I see. Okay. Laurence, would you like to begin?
Thank you. Also, we can see that there's a lot of ideas about what just and sustainable food systems are. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. And we want to gather your views about that first and foremost. So now let's talk about the agenda for today. What's the plan? First, we will introduce the topic. We'll talk about ECOLISE, community-led initiatives, the project that's financing this activity, Com4RGD, and as well as outline the process and that we will take to get to these policy recommendations. After that, in the second part, we'll talk about the EU level. So what is happening at EU level that is also motivating us to develop this position on food. I will introduce that part, and Louise Keller of ARC 2020 will talk about the link between the EU level and the local level and why that matters so much for transforming food systems. After that, in the third part, we have invited some of our members to present some initiatives on food, some community initiatives on food. My colleague Nina Klein will introduce that part, mentioning our manifesto, our values, what's driving us to do this. Then Johannes Kubel of Copernicus and Gen Europe will present his cooperative in Switzerland. Ruby van der Wecken will present her community-supported agriculture scheme called OMAMA, and I hope I'm not pronouncing it wrong. At that point, we should be an hour in, and we will take a short bio break because we're human beings and we do need to have breaks to be more focused. We'll need it because in the fourth part, we will talk about food initiatives in breakout rooms, in smaller groups. We want to get your feedback on interesting food initiatives you are in or you have heard of and why you think they're great, what impact do you think they have positively, and what challenges they might be facing or have faced in the past. And in the end, we'll recap on the next steps of this process. So let's start with the introduction. Why are we here today? I am from ECOLISE, which is the European network for community-led initiatives on climate change and sustainability. We represent about 50 members in 24 European countries. We are a network of network as well. Our pillars as movements are the Transition Network, the Eco-Villages, and the Permaculture Associations. But we have also lots of other types of members, such as research institutions, local governments, social economy, community organizers, and so on. So what are CLIs, the community-led initiatives we talk so much about? They can be many things. The common point is that they all come from groups of citizens deciding to act together to have a positive impact on our environment, on our planet. So they can take the form of community-supported agriculture initiatives, which Ruby will talk about. They can take the form of community gardens, urban gardens, vegetable gardens, local action groups, food councils, where local authorities and citizens get together to discuss future food. They can take the form of cooperatives, of community-driven businesses, of co-housing initiatives, energy communities, repair cafes. Many, many initiatives are possible. Now, how do we do advocacy? We do participatory advocacy. So we don't represent our members. We help our members come together and our partners come together to design policy proposals together. So this is why this is quite a long process, and Kat will tell you more about that. The main point that we do is grounded in the colibri philosophy. So you might have heard that tale of the colibri in the forest faced with a fire. So the colibri is the hummingbird. It's a the tiniest bird. And so the colibri sees this fire in the forest, huge fire, and he sees a lake. He goes to the lake, he picks a drop of water in his beak and goes and throws it on the fire. And then he goes on and on and on again, one drop at a time. And the big animals are looking at him and saying, like, but why are you doing this? This is useless. You never stop that fire. And the colibri goes like, I know I'm tiny, but at least I'm doing my part. So this is really our approach, that lots of drops of water together can make a big difference. So we are joining people together, mobilizing them, organizing deep conversations to act at different levels, to join the local level with the EU level, to inspire each other, and ultimately bring about that change we want to see. So what you need to know is that we have done this before. We've done such participatory policy positioning processes before. You might have heard of our Time for Collective Action Manifesto. This was our program for the European elections. It was a 1.5-year process. We had 900 participants, overall 140 organizations, 70 campaign partners. So we can do it, and we will do it again. Now we're doing it on food systems, more specifically. So we have our general values in the manifesto, and now we are looking at food systems to pick one first specific issue to focus on. We're doing this co-financed by the European Union through the Communities for Local Green Deals project, in which we have a few partners, and you can see the logos here: Gen Europe, ECLI, ELAD, ISHTE, and ECON. You might wonder, what do we mean by food systems? So food systems are all of the parts of the food chain and how they interact together. So it can come from the production, so the farmer producing food, the harvesting. It can be the transformation, so just changing the food, cooking the food for others, processing the food. Then you need to distribute it to actually transport it from one point to another, to bring it together in marketplaces. And then some people eat it, so that's the consumption part. We as consumers also have a role. Some are involved in the consumer side of things. It also includes the diets. Do we need to change our diets, for example? Do we get together to cook common meals? That would also be part of that. And finally, what do we do with the waste? Waste is a huge issue in the food chain. And how can we reuse some of what we are not using to eat directly? So it's a lot. And why are we choosing food systems? We're choosing it because it has many impacts on environment and climate. And that's really the angle that we are interested in. So it's not just food, it's food and all of its impact on environment and climate. Now that I'm done with this introduction, Caterina will come back with a poll for you about what best describes your place in transforming food systems. Kat, do I need to be presenting? Or...
I can also present. Thank you. So now that Laurence has given us the context, we'd like to, in a participatory process, it's important to know who are the stakeholders engaged in it. So that's why we are asking you to respond which part of part of the food system most describes you. So I don't know if we can reply to the poll. Do you see the poll?
No.
Enrique, could you?
Yes.
Open the poll?
Here it is.
So as I said before, we all engage in different parts of the food systems where we may be producers and consumers at the same time doing research and advocacy. And it's good to have a variety of different kinds of stakeholders in any participatory process. So that's why we're asking. And I see we're pretty diverse. I have a lot of concerned citizens, researchers, producers. It's always good to have producers in the room as well. Okay. Okay, so we have a 20% of people producing food in the room, which is very interesting. And 36% doing advocacy. So thank you for filling the poll, and I will move on to explain what this process is about. So, as Laurent said, we've done this before. We've done what we call a deepening phase, which is taking a topic and discussing it into depth and through the ECOLISE way of doing advocacy, having an output, which is a policy paper. So the goal of this policy positioning is to amplify the grassroots voices in EU food policy. And the outcome of this process will be a policy positioning document, which will be endorsed by partners and members, which will outline the barriers, the opportunities, and the policy recommendations that come from a grassroots perspective in order to improve the food policy towards just and sustainable food systems. But what we will do is we will ground these policy recommendations in the collection of the stories that you will bring. So we don't expect you to come with a policy proposal necessarily, but the goal of this process is to co-create, based on the stories, to co-create the policy proposals. And this will be the foundation for a dialogue with policymakers to promote the stories and the policy recommendations at an EU level. So if you're a member of a civil society organization, if you're a researcher, if you're a member of community-led initiative, you're a farmer, a policymaker, and you operate in different levels, like locally, regionally, nationally, or an EU level, and you are committed to addressing climate, biodiversity, and sustainability, all these challenges through transformative food practices, and you want to contribute to reshaping these food systems to prioritize justice, biodiversity, and resilience, then you're more than welcome to join us in this process. So, but what is this process? It has a specific timeline, as I said before. So we're currently in the briefing and information part, where we're trying to join all the correct people in the room and establish a shared understanding of what we're talking about. Then after deciding what are the key topics, we do what we call deep dives. Like, for example, we can have an overall topic, which is access to land, and then we collect specific stories based on the key topic that we decide. And that's how we collect the building blocks of the policy positioning. And then in summer, ideally, we will move to a consent phase. Well, we take all the building blocks and we co-create a written, visually attractive policy position, which connects both the policy recommendation and the good practices, so the stories that you bring, and we consent on it, which is a sociocratic practice that ECOLISE network is very based upon. And throughout this process, the goal is to have policymakers, to target policymakers, but also after this policy proposal is over, we will also promote this to a policy event. So you can be engaged in many different ways, from low commitment to high commitment. So you're more than welcome to follow the process, join the calls, talk about it, share your stories without any strings attached, like join one call, join two calls, or how many of you like. Or if you're a member of an organization or a CSO or a farm or something, you can join as a partner, so which means a commitment to contribute to the process, like into the consent process, which can be done synchronously or asynchronously. Like, as I said, with 4 different parts, you're expected to have a contribution in each part, and you accept, you contribute to these 4 phases at a level that that is possible for you, and you agree to showcase your logo as a supporter of this process, which doesn't mean that you agree with the final outcome necessarily, but it means that you support the process of participatory policy making, and you disseminate this with your network. This means approximately 1 call of 2 hours every month for 6 months. So starting from here to June. And if you're an ECOLISE member, you can also join as an editorial board member, which means that you steer the consent process of this participatory advocacy process, so that it ensures the alignment with the overall visions and values of the ECOLISE network, which is it's a higher commitment, means joining all of the calls and also having some extra calls to steer the process. But why would you do this? So first of all, of course, the goal is to influence EU policies, to amplify the impact and the recognition of community-led initiatives and their potential to transform and shape sustainable and just food systems. But it's not only about influencing, it's also about inspiring, because there's a lack of social imagination currently of how sustainable food can be produced. So bringing the stories is a very important aspect of this. And also having all these amazing people in the room, it's about alliance building, like meeting people and collaborate with like-minded people from all around Europe and beyond, from organizations, farmers, etc. And this process, joining this process means also capacity building in terms of advocacy. So this is not just influencing EU policy, but by doing advocacy and joining a process where inspiring stories are transformed into policy recommendation, it's a capacity building in terms of advocacy. And also it's a way to gain communication and visibility through the channels of ECOLISE. And I pass it on to Laurence to talk us about what the plans are regarding food systems.
Thank you, Kat. Sorry. Thank you, Kat. So now that you know about the process, let's dive into the second part of this call about the EU plans on food and linking up the EU to the local level. So what are the plans? You might remember we had European elections in June, and what has happened since then? Yes, the European Parliament was elected, but perhaps more importantly, a new European Commission has just been appointed as a result of the European elections. So we have the same president. It is still Ursula von der Leyen for a second term, but she has a changed team. So there is one commissioner per member state, and they've just started work. It has started on Sunday, and it will go on for 5 years until the next year elections. What's the context here? You probably remember the farmer protests. It's still going on in some countries. There has been these protests not only in your country, but in many European countries. Even in Brussels, you see this is a picture of the European Parliament with trucks in front of it. And so because there was a lot of protests, the European Commission decided to act on this and to act on the farmer situation. Their response was to organize a dialogue, a closed dialogue between some key stakeholders, some key associations at European level. So it was not transparent. However, the outcome of it was a report on the future of EU agriculture, which is quite progressive and is presented as a consensus between very varied positions. So this is what the situation is. It's quite new, and the EU will now inspire itself from this report to make its proposals. And we will share in the link that report in case you are interested in it. Now, what is the EU cooking that's relevant for food? Quite a lot. But the most important is the upcoming vision on the future of not only agriculture, but also food. So they are linking it together now. And this will come in the next 100 days. So by end of February, it should be a big plan. And that will be our main interest. However, there are other plans that are impactful for food as well. There's a big water plan coming up. And water is so important for food, of course. And there's also a climate adaptation plan going on. So what do we do to prevent and adapt to droughts or floods, for example? Something that might be of interest to you is the idea of designing incentives for nature positive actions or nature credits. So what's behind that is still to be defined, but what it makes us think about is that it will tackle payment for ecosystem services, so the services nature provides us. Then there will be a circular economy plan, and of course, food can be very circular. And one of our favorites is the plan to be more to use more participatory democracy by organizing citizen assemblies and youth policy dialogues. On that note, I will hand over to Louise to present the rest of this part on the EU level and how to link it up to the local level. Louise, I'm going to stop sharing my presentation now.
Okay, hello everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. It's very exciting to be part of this launch. It feels like it is the beginning of something big. And it's great to see such a range of participants here. I'm really very impressed with the range and the geographic spread. It's fantastic. So I will try to share. Let's keep fingers crossed. Here we are. Okay. Can you see my screen okay? Good. Great. So my name is Louise Kelleher, and I'm working with ARC 2020, which is the Agricultural and Rural Convention. And I chose this picture to begin with because I think it demonstrates quite nicely what we're trying to do as an organization, and possibly it will chime with a lot of people here today, which when we see all these divides and these farmer protests and this kind of polarized society, I think food is really a bridge. We can bring people together around the table. And I think, you know, we have environmentalists, we have farmers, and we have all this talk of these divisions, rural areas, urban areas. But when you see people coming and sitting around the table and breaking bread together, sharing food together, I think it's a good way to come out of our bubbles and really realize that we have that common human element of eating 3 times a day. So I just want to make sure I can get through my slides. Yeah, just quickly describe the organization then. Agricultural and Rural Convention comes from, I think 20 years ago, 22 years ago, 2002, there were attempts to have some kind of European constitution. So Agricultural and Rural Convention came in as a kind of a response to that process, saying that we can't talk about agriculture without talking about rural areas, because these are not just places of production, but they're also places of life where people live, where you have communities that are affected by decisions that are made around agriculture. So we like to describe the organization as doing the splits between the EU and the local level. So you can see on the top half here, this green and yellow, we kind of work at an EU watchdog kind of a level, policy analysis, pointing out what's happening in terms of policy developments up in Brussels. We like to shine a light on what's happening and provide positive proposals. But of course, it comes back to what you were saying with ECOLISE and this participatory process. We don't come up with our own policy proposals, but they're reflecting what we're hearing from other CSOs on the ground. We're more like a platform to highlight those proposals, especially in these sort of shifting times that we have. There is a lot of rollback happening. So it's important to also have something positive that we can rally around, I think. And at the bottom part here, you'll see more the work we do on local level. So we like to, a lot of very good work is being done at local level in different territories across Europe around food, around agriculture, and around rural development. We like to amplify those initiatives that might not be heard about otherwise. So, and also to build bridges between those rural communities and the EU institutions. And as well as that, to build bridges between rural communities themselves. The picture that I showed at the start was a gathering that we had in France 2 years ago. And that's one way where you can sit down rural practitioners from different parts of Europe, and people can realize how much they have in common challenges and maybe common responses. So yeah, it's basically all in the spirit of rural resilience. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of very good initiatives happening already. So it's really just to bring all those voices out and allow them to be heard, and also point to that at Brussels level. It's good to get the attention of policymakers and let them see all the good things that are happening on the ground already. So I just, next of all, I was asked to just give a sense of the policy, advocacy landscape at EU level. So I just wanted to flag a couple of organizations that are doing very good work. You probably know Good Food, Good Farming, which is a network and a movement that runs campaigns on these issues. You can see here in the pictures the Vote for Future campaign that they had around the time of the European elections, encouraging people to get out and vote. You can see in this map the sort of geographical reach that the movement has across Europe, and they do a very nice campaign every October called the Food Action Days, where on the ground initiatives are invited to join this action and kind of build some momentum during the month of October. So that one's obviously just finished there in the last few weeks for this year. But it's very nice because it's very open to any initiatives that are on the ground in any country. They can join this, and you'll see on the right here another campaign in terms of info in a sort of a very accessible comic style. They had a series of info comics, just making the kind of ordinary citizen aware of these issues and how they're interlinked. I think it's very important to remind people that just because food is getting more expensive, it doesn't mean the farmers are making money from it. You know, there's a systemic problem, and the farmers are caught in the middle, as are consumers. And where that can change is at EU level. So I think Good Food, Good Farming do a nice job of pointing out those connections. And another organization, just to bring to your attention if you don't know them, is the EU Food Policy Coalition. I believe it began in 2019 when they came together around a joint vision for food, which was put together by the IPES food group. And there's now a very, very large coalition of organizations across Europe that are part of this policy coalition. So, of course, in the spirit of Stronger Together. And quite excitingly for me, because I work in communications, is this Framing Food and Farming document that they've launched today. So it's not the only launch happening today. They had a launch event for this morning. And it's basically a toolkit to re-articulate the messages we have around food and farming. For example, instead of saying biodiversity loss, to say biodiversity destruction, which is quite powerful because it's not just a passive process that's happening. There are, the agro industry is causing this damage, is causing this destruction, and it's that, which implies that something can be done about it. So I think that's very interesting in terms of reframing our thinking. So that's the EU Food Policy Coalition, which does a lot of other good work as well. What comes to mind recently, they did send a joint letter to the new European Commission with a lot of demands in terms of the opportunities that are coming up in the next 100 days. As Laurence referred to, really a lot can happen now with this new vision. And so there is a lot to play for at the moment. And I think, organizations like that are doing very good work there. There are a lot of practitioners on the ground here in this meeting, so I hope it will be interesting to just point to some of the funding opportunities that are out there for you. Obviously, you will probably have heard of these, but just in case, we'll run through them from the biggest to the smallest. We start with Horizon Europe, which is the EU's research and innovation funding mechanism. Which is for usually very, very big projects. The next one then would be Interreg, which encourages trans-border cross-regional cooperation. So if you want to work with another region in Europe, that would be a good place to look for your funding. The LIFE project, which is the EU's environmental funding mechanism. Doing great work, with just a caveat which I've added on the right, this news story that was broken by Politico in the last few weeks, that the Commission is telling NGOs that EU money is not for lobbying. So LIFE funded organizations are being told that they can't use that money for lobbying, which is kind of contradicts the policy proposal components of some of those projects that are actually supposed to lobby the EU. So it's a little bit worrying to see that development there from the new Commission. But apart from that, the final funding mechanism I wanted to flag is the European Solidarity Corps, which, especially for the growers and producers, you may be interested to know that you can bring volunteers to your farm, for example, for up to 12 months. It's facilitated by this European Solidarity Corps program. The condition being that you're in some way contributing to the community with your food project or your farm project. So that's an interesting one. Now, am I okay for time? I'll just quickly mention what ARC 2020 has been up to in terms of moving forward. At the moment, just last weekend, we were in Poland for a gathering, which we are describing as a European Triangle for Rural Action. So I mentioned this event in France 2 years ago. We began with a rural resilience project, again, focusing on spotlighting all the really good initiatives that were happening on the ground in France specifically. And I found some wonderful work being done there. In particular, the municipality of Plessé, which is in the northwest of France, they have a participatory democracy process where they were elected on a citizen list. and essentially said, well, how about instead of the common agricultural policy at EU level, how about we try to see what we can do at local level? So they have what they call the PAAC, the Politique Alimentaire Agricole Communale. So it's their own local food and farming policy, which is very, very interesting. So learning from Plessé, then we had another gathering last year in Marburg in Germany, where there's a wonderful group called Kollektiv von Morgen, which are working to bring together the different food stakeholders to promote regional food. What they essentially do, their approach is quite educational. They create a space for people to come together and have conversations. And that's a way to open up and build divides. It's a very inspiring process, because they really managed to bring in the different politicians at local level, different businesses, different stakeholders, and try and be as open politically, to have as broad a church politically as possible. And then on to Żubów in Poland, which is the gathering that we had this weekend just gone, which was a lot of fun at the Ecological Folk High School in Żubów, where the idea is to learn by doing, to bring people in touch with organic agriculture and agroecology, and to sing together, to dance together. It's all part of the learning process, and the idea of bringing a lot of the individual and the community into that classroom in a very hands-on way. So we found by working with these three areas that there's really a triangle akin to the Weimar Triangle. So this idea of these three nations, France, Germany, and Poland, cooperating together. We have found that by moving in this triangle across Europe, as we have done, well, if you look at the map, it's technically more of a line, but we're thinking of it as a triangle because of these three key points. There's so much potential for local action, but also at European level. And it's extremely inspiring, I think, not to be underestimated when these stories and initiatives at local level are brought to the attention of policymakers in Brussels. It really does make a difference. You know, they can see exactly the impacts of policy on the ground and how they may or may not be facilitating better food and farming at local level and across the territories of Europe. So I just wanted to end on that nice, inspiring note, that perhaps sometimes when we work at EU level, we can also bridge it with the work on local level and increase the impact. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Louise. Very, very interesting. Thanks for sharing all of this hope as well of what the local level can bring to the EU. We will have a Q&A session after our next speakers. So if there are questions to Louise or to the speakers coming next, please put them in the Q&A section of Zoom, whatever it's called in your language. And we will have a few minutes to talk about that afterwards. After Louise, it's Nina's turn to introduce the part on the food initiatives. Nina, you ready to present?
Yes, I am. Could you show my slides? Sorry. Happy to connect what Laurence talked about before, ECOLISE's Time for Collective Action Manifesto, which took 1.5 years to grow, together with 900 people and 140 organizations. And this is kind of to give you a bit of a sense of the structure this food policy positioning could take. So it's a suggestion. ECOLISE has a Time for Collective Action manifesto. And on the next slide, you can see if, Laurence, thank you. You can see it has a website. It lives on a website, and we invite you to sign the manifesto as well. It was part, or the central part, of the communication campaign ECOLISE did for the European elections. And this Time for Collective Action manifesto is kind of a worldview, values and principles, big landscape manifesto about collective action, community-led, citizen-driven collective action, and its part in environmental and climate action overall. It's trying to link, as Louise said also, to link EU policy making levels and grassroots levels of climate and environmental action. So we invite you to have a look at this, and in the next slide I'll talk a bit about, there are 7 key asks of this manifesto, and you can make links from all of these asks to food systems. So the idea, and Katarina, my colleague Katarina mentioned this, is basically to apply this lens of the Time for Collective Action Manifesto to the specific policy field of food systems. And you can see I know you're caught in the website, Kat. If we look at the first ask, and that's just to give you just to give you an idea how this could work, the structuring. The first ask is really to recognize community-led initiatives as laboratories for transformative social innovation. And that means to recognize these citizen-driven, citizen-led collective action, which, as Laurence pointed out, and as everybody who spoke so far pointed out, are enormously diverse. What brings them together, what holds them together, is that they are active for transformative social innovation. So recognize the role of transformative social innovation in policies and funding programs. So that's one key ask. And just if you have a look at this visual, which says, what's the ecological footprint of community-led initiatives? And some of you will recognize a few of these eco-villages, most of them Findhorn, Siebenlinden in Germany, Bedset in UK. And what you can see there is most of them are well below the average. Some of them are within the carrying capacity of the Earth, but by far not all of them. And that leads us to the second key ask of the manifesto. What we really ask is to support the right to have a choice to live sustainably. And that's very focused on liberty, on freedom. So it's a human rights-based approach. And I know that Jalotos, somebody from Jalotos, is here with us today. Great to see you. So one could apply this right to have a choice to live sustainably easily to food systems, and I'm sure in your brains you're already making the connections. Our example was always, even if you have a permaculture garden, you're growing your food yourself, around your plot of land you have somebody spraying pesticides, which is fine with EU regulations right now. And also for local communities, municipalities, there are different situations. If you're in France, your municipality can't say, we don't want that, we want a buffer zone. If you're in Belgium, your municipality could say that. So it's a different situation overall in Europe. So support the right to have a choice is one of the key asks. And then this one basically means that we have to change the economic system for well-being, to focus the economic system on well-being and care. So I'm sure in your brains and hearts you can have lots of ideas about that as well. Applying that to food systems, for example, local procurement right now. EU policies prevent local municipalities from doing procurement as they want to do. Like if you want to have a canteen in your school, and if you want to have it with local seasonal organic food, then you have to rephrase this procurement call for procurement so that it doesn't say I want to have local, regional, organic food, but it says I need to cut down on transport waste. So you need to kind of rephrase it, but because the EU says the competition should be equal to all countries within the EU. So there are a few leverage points and barriers, and you can have a look at them. And the invitation is really for you in this process to apply a few of these key asks. And in the next slide, we can see there are, and that's the why we have this big diverse group here today. There are so many models already from community-led initiatives for food systems, like the pillars of food sovereignty. And on the next slide, you can see the idea of earth stewardship, which is also something which is part of the manifesto. So applying what is there and forming something new out of it. That's what this food policy positioning is aiming towards. And I'm really happy to have two people here in the room. That is Johannes Kübel, who will talk next. And after him, it's Ruby van der Wecken. And Johannes, your example is about a whole food value chain cooperative. Johannes, let us know more about this, please.
Thank you, Nina. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay, nice. Yeah, so love to share something about from Switzerland and from Lightwave and Copernicus, and also with the question, how does Switzerland's policies are catalyzing right now the transformation of food systems? And for that, I prepared a little overview about our food system. It's a little abstract. Downstairs, we can see our Earth, our Mother Earth. I'm wondering, when was the last time you had like hugging a tree or hugging Mother Earth? I mean, she's providing us so much food. It's amazing. It's amazing to be on this earth and to be so much nourished. And yeah, the producers or the farmers, they work a lot with the earth, and how you can see, some of the food goes then to processors, like for example, to make cheese or make bread. And mostly of this food goes then to the traders. And that's something that most of the people don't know. The food doesn't go directly to the supermarkets. There are traders in between. And then there are these huge supermarkets and the little Emma grocery stores in the cities that are getting less and less. And then you have all the consumers that we are also part of it. And what's happening right now, it's that the supermarkets are getting more and more power concentration. They get more and more money in the system, and they're putting new conditions to the traders. And the traders are putting their conditions of prices of the food to the producers. And the producers have to find a way how to produce more efficient or more effective, that they can still provide the food that are asked for. And that's a very not sustainable system. And at the same time, there's some people upstairs here in the traders, companies and supermarket companies that are private owned and getting a lot of money out of it. And the question is, why are we doing this actually? Why we don't change something? And that's a question that we have made also in Switzerland. And we have a solution that we see that could break the power structures into our food system. And the proposal is that we create regional cooperatives through the whole value chain. So we have the producers, the processors, and the grocery stores, and the end customers all together in one cooperative. And the idea behind this is to, I forgot something. And the idea is also to organize the consumers in food co-ops. Food co-ops is so-called, people in the neighborhood can come together and create this food co-op. And the idea is behind this is that they can directly buy from the producers. So we have this regional cooperative and we have this direct trade. So the farmers don't need to sell anymore to the traders and not anymore to the supermarkets, but can directly sell to the food co-ops and also to the grocery stores or restaurants. And for that, you need infrastructure. You need an online marketplace, and you need also like a logistic infrastructure. And with that, we can create more balance our food system. So we don't need to work against each other in a value chain, but we can cooperate together. We can own together infrastructure of IT and logistics. And then we can spread the money much better, and much more money can go to the farmer, and we can cooperate also much more for the production and processing side. And that's just an example how we kickstarted 4 years ago from our community. I live in the Jupiter House in Zurich, and we started together with Gut Rheiner, the cooperative Copernicus. So this is this regional cooperative where we started also the direct trade with the online marketplace Lightwave and with the logistic Pico. And that's how we started here in Zurich, this network. And we are not the only ones. So we helped also to create new regional cooperatives in other regions in Zurich already. And that's also a proposal from our side for policymaking, that because in Switzerland we got some support already from the canton level, but also from the city level and also from the country level, that they need to support more the building of new regional cooperatives, and also to finance more the infrastructure, so the logistic infrastructure and the online infrastructure, and as well the creation of food groups. That's something that are starting right now in Switzerland, and it's coming more and more. So they are supporting with this kind of policies the transformation of the food system. And another important element is to integrate the direct trade with the public sector canteens, because there's so much hospitals, schools, kindergartens, and there are so many people eating each day in this kind of canteens, and they have a huge impact if they would change more to buy directly from the farmers and also organic. So that's something that is starting to happen in Switzerland. I think we should really consider this kind of policy, and that could be elements as a proposal from our side how on the EU level could be integrated for other regions. Yeah, I mean that's everything that I can share, and yeah, don't forget to hug a tree these days. If you're interested, you can write me an mail or join, and we can co-create. And yeah, happy to look also forward for the policy making group. Thank you. I pass it back to Lawrence.
Thank you very much, Johannes. This is very interesting, and we're taking good note of your proposals, and we look forward to hearing more throughout this process. And now we will hear, and yes, I will remember to hug a tree. It's been a long time indeed. Now we'll give the floor to Ruby van der Wecken from Finland, representing RIPES and involved in community-supported agriculture. Ruby, are you ready to take over the presentation?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for having me here and greeting everyone. And else now I have to push the right buttons and do as I was just taught. 1 minute. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Ah, wonderful. And am I now getting in a... Am I coming in the mode of showing? Yes.
Yes, it's working.
Yes. So warm, although it's not so warm here. Greetings from Finland. I'm right now here in the kitchen and warehouse building of our food cooperative Omama, which means our soil, our land. When we're talking about policy, I very quickly introduce our cooperative here, and then a few grounding things about if we want to start to talk about policy. So our food cooperative is some 15 years old, and I already put there up front a little part from our vision document. About how we're talking about that around the year we want to engage in an ecological community, so importantly a people's process around good agriculture, and referring then to agriculture that yes, it's about food, but it is actually about the fulfilling of different basic needs, so that large notion of what agriculture is about. So as said, we have been the cooperative was founded already some 15 years ago. It's some 30 kilometers situated out of Helsinki in Tuusula. 2 farms are participating there, and we reach out with our distribution and activities to some neighboring smaller city, and then of course mainly to Helsinki. So on the lands of the farms, there are gardens, our food forest of course, and also the land where grain is being cultivated, and also a number of cows, which are the defenders of our biodiversity. Now, the main principles with which we are doing things is that first we care for the land, and then we see what we eat. So of course we want to talk then about the capacity of the land to be strengthening biodiversity, as I was already put forward, and of course notions as carbon sequestration and nutrient recycling, and of course then we permaculture and polyculture. So good agriculture, putting those values up front, but also then very importantly rooted in a peer-to-peer pedagogical process of co-production. So the legs of ecology and the social are absolutely like intertwined. I apologize for these terrible slides full with words. I really have to learn how to do this better. And there's no time for all of this, but the word food sovereignty already came up. But I just wanted to say is that when we're talking about policy, let us, of course, not forget that there is a movement, a worldwide movement that already has been going on, of course, for decades, in which the notion of food sovereignty was developed, what that means, and how then today that struggle is taking forward. And I refer also to fantastic global processes going on, as now the process towards the Nieleni Forum next year, possibly in India, in which demands of all kind of producers from different segments are coming together to discuss around food sovereignty today, and to have also struggles of solidarity. So when we are building our policies, yes, important to keep looking at those the movement also that we see ourselves as being part of. I bring also the movement here of solidarity economy, that is then that RIPES part, to say, of course, that if you're talking about food system change, that of course is to be embedded in the notion of that we need another economy. And I know that also the manifesto already in many ways refers to that. But that is also where community-supported agriculture came from. It came from the understanding of the broken food system and wanting to come to something else. And of course, in CSAs, that is expressed as getting more trust-based relations between producer members and food members. And importantly, actually, in that work, change also the barriers between those kind of those categories of actors. Now, our initiatives, they are importantly, they're not just about helping our farmers. They're very importantly, and that was actually also already mentioned there in the manifesto, that they are spaces to learn from a social perspective. What is it to carry responsibility together for what we're doing, to understand what the budget is about, to understand how we can build trust and not division also when we're talking about finances. Of course, ecological laboratories, because how can we learn to understand our ecosystems better, to learn to use different produce, which actually is coming forth out of good agriculture. So all that together then, our initiatives, they are very important places where we can ask ourselves the question, so what is it that we want to do? And what are our resources to do so, and what are our skills to realize this? So empower people to, by co-doing and co-learning, change also realities. This slide is the worst. It's going to get better after this. I talked already about the fact that also good to put this in the context of other economy building. Now I put here up front the notion of solidarity economy, which is basically a grassroots perspective to wanting to look at economy and to saying that contrary to what is put predominantly so, there are actually all kind of levels of economic activities around in which other values than profit making are upfront, and that if we gave more visibility to them, if we work more through them, if we link them more together, we can be growing the space for another economy. And in that process, of course, actually what we are doing is we are carrying more responsibility for our things that are in common. We are governing things according to other values, and we're creating actually more commons. It's the antithesis of when things like food would be in a market and when profit is being made. We're making them common. So it's importantly also about a paradigm shift here that we're talking about. And how can we get the paradigm shift of the commons better understood on an EU level? That is, of course, another thing to talk about. Now, why does all of this matter? I have here a slide of our farmer, Jukka Lassila, from whom I have learned an awful lot. And I have a quote here by him. I read it here because I think that it says so much. So as he puts it, that first is, as we already talked about, we eat, or at least many of us eat three times in a day. So food is first of all what joins us all. So therefore, in whose hands lie the control of our food system, and including also water, as was mentioned. In those hands, the control of society lies. So in other words, people can more govern their own lives when the food system is in their control. So in that sense, all efforts being done to get the food system again more into control of people is important for the development of society. And only by addressing that, we can change a society more just and fair. So now what is being said here? It's being said so much all over that if we change our basic needs systems, meaning if we change the way we, as was said, produce, distribute, and consume things like food, but also, of course, energy, it is being said that we can create systemic change. And here described as developing pathways towards better and healthier communities, and therefore also society. But importantly, what we're also saying is that this can only happen if that change is rooted in people's processes, because we have seen time and time again how the market fails to deliver. And I think that this is an important message also when we talk about policy. We can talk about the drops that together can be reaching for change. But importantly, we should also talk that change has to be rooted in our local initiatives. And that's actually also the hope that we could say that we are bringing if you want to address things in terms of policy, that there's actually systemic change is to be rooted in our initiatives, or there will not be systemic change. Now, this is all a very wonderful story, but obviously there are very many challenges related to how to fulfill that potential of changing something like our food system. Has such a great potential to be leading to systemic change, but how can it actually fulfill that? Now, of course, grappling with financial resources is something that many of us will know about. And then you could get into things of like how project requirements, it can be very difficult to have to, for instance, already put up front a good part of the budget, or one needs to, for instance, cannot be getting like things like secondhand machines or to be engaging in production. And so there are a number of basically requirements that are often put, which are very hard for initiatives to fulfill. We make our food bags around a year. We have fresh produce, but also secondary production. So that means that we also have a kitchen. And one just realizes that in so many levels of this, working on the grassroots level, there are so many issues with requirements that are extremely hard to fulfill for small actors that are trying to do very diverse things. They work very well for big actors that are engaging in monoproduction, of course, in that way supporting monoculture, but in other ways there are very big problems with that. Of course, also that brings us to think about how easy it is for people in these times to actually buy from their CSA producers. As I was saying, we make food bags around the year. We also have secondary production. So how can we support policies that are actually trying to support citizens to be able to buy also from their CSAs? And I think there are some very interesting experiments now going on in Belgium, in France, in which experiments are happening with the so-called credit cards, in which one can directly buy from a producer. And in that way, you can also put out that from where a food can be bought as part of the social subsidies policies that the place could be happening. Now, this kind of farming in diversity, which is good for our soil and which is also good for people, it needs actually very many people on board with that. It would give plenty of opportunities for people to engage in livelihoods which can be meaningful and healthy. But despite that, there's so much talked about green transitioning. Where is the addressing of issues as, for instance, the length of a working week, which could be answers to question of like, can many of us more have a better relation with our land and where our food comes from? Not to say everybody, but for some people, this can be very good options. One could think about things like basic income, of course, which could be, I mean, in Finland, basically, it is so, if you are unemployed, it is not at all obvious to say that you're doing volunteer work somewhere, not to mention the fact that you would be receiving food in exchange for work. That would definitely already bring legal issues. So there is a lot of societal barriers that make it very difficult for people to actually engage in their community-supported agriculture or other initiatives, even though that could be very beneficial from many perspectives. I also put there.
We should wrap up.
Time's up.
Yes. Time's up.
Yes. Okay. I already mentioned a bit about the need for different kinds of legislative framework. If we're now talking here about food in the commons, I mean, there should be gateways for us to politically be able to voice things, the challenges, demands, the needs. Where are these? It shouldn't only depend on the luck to be receiving certain kind of funds. How can we systemically, as grassroots initiatives, have a political voice and argue for our political demands also? Okay, I end it here.
Thank you, Ruby. Now let's move to a quick session of Q&A. I didn't see many questions in the Q&A part. Nina, is there something that should be brought to our attention that speakers can answer? So are any of the speakers in contact with the EARA?
Sorry, I shouldn't have maybe put the acronym. It's the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture. They just met last week and are also trying to have a European network collaborating on what can we do, because as I understand it, a lot of the regenerative agriculture techniques are just impossible because of legislation. So how can this be? It's maybe the book by Joel Salatin rings a bell. Everything I want to do is illegal. Well, that's kind of what we are up against. When you want to offer regenerative chicken meat, you need to put them on a concrete floor. This goes against regenerative agriculture. So things like this, I was wondering if there's any overlap, or are you in contact, because they are also pushing towards getting this type of legislation through and having policy change in these types of questions.
Thanks, Aline. We are not in touch with them yet, but indeed I've seen that they have started quite recently, and we would be happy to involve them going forward. I'm stopping it here because we are running a bit late, and we'd like to have a short break before we get into the most important part of today, which is the breakout rooms, where we can exchange about food initiatives in smaller groups. So thank you very much to the speakers. That was really enlightening. And I suggest we meet again at 2:20 for the breakout rooms. See you in 5 minutes.
We are the power of collective will, the force of unity, the beauty of diversity, the strength of resilience. We're not just shaping a sustainable world, we're building a thriving one by being socially innovative, creative, and experimental, by living with and learning from nature, from introducing permaculture in small villages to fostering community gardens in urban neighborhoods, from energy, food, and housing cooperatives to repair cafes and local currencies, from eco-villages to transition initiatives. We are the growing movement of transformative community-led initiatives, a big table that gathers seekers, visionaries, doers, believers, a table where we share ideas, celebrate, and make change come true, a table that is open to you, to everybody. We are social and ecological sculptors, crafting a world where every choice resonates with our future and that of the planet. We are the proof that regeneration can happen. Those who demonstrate that living in harmony with the planet is possible in every community, because we believe that everybody has the right to live sustainably.